This is WFYI News Now. It's August 13th, and I'm Abriana Herron. On today's show, Indiana's candidates for lieutenant governor hit the debate stage. New research shows a connection between having a satisfactory romantic relationship and physical and mental health for breast cancer survivors. And a new high school in Indy will give students a chance to see sustainable building practices in their own classrooms.
The systems of the building are exposed so that they can see here's where the heating and air goes, here's the ventilation, here's the electrical stuff, so that they can learn from the building instead of just in a building.
Those stories coming up. But first, new funding for Indiana food banks was recently granted by the Indiana State Department of Agriculture. As WFYI's Jill Sheridan reports, $2 million will go to 11 food banks across the state.
The regional food banks provide and distribute food to communities through pantries, kitchens, and other feeding programs. The additional funding was approved by the state legislature in the budget this year. Food banks have reported an increased need for food assistance. Feeding Indiana's Hungry reports 1 in 5 children experienced food insecurity in 2022. Gleaner's Food Bank will receive nearly $700,000. It's by far the largest grant. Gleaner serves 21 counties in central Indiana. Food banks that serve northern Indiana communities in Fort Wayne, Maryville, and Lafayette will receive about $200,000 each. Distribution is determined through a federal emergency food assistance program and figured on poverty and unemployment numbers. I'm Jill Sheridan.
Indiana's 3 candidates for lieutenant governor are taking the debate stage Tuesday. It's the first debate between them ahead of November's election. From WFYI's Education Desk, Rachel Fredette reports more on this showdown that will take place at the Indiana State Fairgrounds.
Republican Micah Beckwith and Democrat Terry Gooden will face off alongside Libertarian nominee Tanya Hudson. Candidates are expected to discuss agriculture and rural issues and how that impacts the state's economy. The lieutenant governor runs the Department of Agriculture and the Office of Community and Rural Affairs. They oversee tourism and housing development offices and also preside over the Senate. The lieutenant governor is on standby should the governor ever leave office due to death, resignation, or removal by impeachment. Beckwith's victory over gubernatorial candidate Mike Braun's pick for the job brought more attention to this race than years prior. I'm Rachel Fredette.
The debate is free to fair visitors. It will also be streamed on YouTube. A new data analysis shows that having a satisfactory romantic relationship leads to better physical and mental health for breast cancer survivors. SideFX Public Media's Elizabeth Gabriel has more on the research out of Indiana University.
There are roughly 4 million women in the U.S. who have a history with invasive breast cancer, and research shows a third of the patients experience mental or emotional distress. Dr. Eric Vachon is a professor at Indiana University. He says not having a satisfactory relationship can lead to worse health outcomes.
There was worse depression in those individuals who had worse satisfaction between the survivor and their partner. They also had issues with poor overall quality of sleep.
The study also includes responses from partners of breast cancer survivors. Many experienced similar side effects while caring for their loved one. Medical professionals recommend survivors and their partners engage in strong communication and compassion. Elizabeth Gabriel, SideFX Public Media.
And for our final story today, a new Indianapolis high school will give students a chance to see sustainable building practices in their own classrooms. From WFYI's Education Desk, Dylan Pierce-McCoy reports that the campus was renovated with help from a U.S. Department of Energy grant.
The Match High School and Career Center opened this month on the near west side of Indianapolis. Students will study careers beginning in their freshman year. Amy Swan is CEO of Matchbook Learning, which runs the school. She says they tried to make the space part of the learning process for students who are studying engineering and trades.
The systems of the building are exposed so that they can see here's where the heating and air goes, here's the ventilation, here's the electrical stuff, so that they can learn from the building instead of just in a building.
The Match High School is a charter school that's free for students and independently managed. It opened this year with about 50 students in 9th grade. I'm Dylan Pierce-McCoy.
That's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by Drew Daudelin, with support from the news team at WFYI and public media journalists across the state. Our news director is Sarah Neal-Estes. Kendall Antron produced our music, and I'm your host, Abriana Herron. If you like today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.